Alright. Okay, so this is going to be a new type of video. On the left side here, I have the SAT suite of questions. It's a question bank provided by College Board. I don't know if I'm going to be uploading this video because it's probably going to take a while to upload, but probably I will because it's going to be fun. This is a bit of a practice. I want to study, but I want to study and also be entertained at the same time. So I've taken the route of filming a video. There's about 386 questions in here. If you include the ones in the practice tests provided by College Board, then you get 1,270. Since I've been through all the practice tests, and well, technically I have been through all the questions in this question bank about 3 months ago, but that memory is getting a bit mushy, and I'm going to be taking the test 3 days from now, so I thought it'd be good practice if I took one final look at all the questions. I'm going to exclude active questions because I plan on taking the practice tests 5 and 6s tomorrow as a sort of final preparation procedure. But yeah, so we're going to go in order. So this is the first question. I'm going to click it. It's going to pop up here. It's going to have some text. And then we're going to scroll down until the fourth option. And then I'll pick and choose the option. All right. And then we can scroll down and see the answer. So I'm going to try to annotate it with my voice and try to, sort of put everything in logic. Okay, so the first question, Marta Cole and colleagues, 2010 Mediterranean Sea Biodiversity Census reported approximately 17,000 species, nearly double the number reported in Carlo Bianchi and Carlo Mori's 2000 census, a difference only partly attributable to the description of new invertebrate species in their interim. Okay, another factor is that morphological variability of microorganisms is poorly understood compared to that of vertebrates, invertebrates, plants, and algae, creating uncertainty about how to evaluate microorganisms as a species. Okay, researchers' decisions on such matters therefore can be highly consequential. Indeed, the two censuses reported similar counts of vertebrate, plant, and algal species, suggesting that... Okay, so basically what the text is talking about here is that there's been two studies, right? There's been two studies, one in 2010 and one in 2000s, one by Marta Cole and colleagues and the other by Carlo Mori. The difference here is that, according to the text here, there's a big difference in sea biodiversity, right? So one party has nearly double the sea biodiversity the other has reported, despite the difference of the two studies being only a decade. So, what does this text attribute that discrepancy to? Well, it's quite simple. It says, while we have understandings about all of these things, we have very poor understandings about microorganisms. So basically what it's saying is, due to the high fluctuation and lack of information and data about microorganisms and their biodiversity, there has been incredible and extreme discrepancies between research conducted about biodiversity. So let me read the concluding sentence again. Indeed, the two censuses reported similar counts of vertebrate, plant, and algal species, suggesting that, so it must have something to do that, suggesting that, it would probably go something like this. Microorganism species contributed to the discrepancy in biodiversity. So let's read answer choice A. Cole and colleagues reported a much higher number of species than Bianchi, largely due to inclusion. Nope, we are not talking about invertebrates. Some differences observed in microorganisms may have been treated as variations. See, now this one's probably the answer. I'm going to say that this is the answer, but just to be sure and use POE, which is product of elimination, or process of elimination, we're going to go through C and D. Sorry, I caught my own spit. Bianchi and Mori may have been less sensitive to the degree of typical species of... No, we're not talking about typical species. And also, I believe this doesn't make sense. Yeah, because if they were less sensitive, then that would mean they would have less. But, they do have less. Okay, well, but, I mean, I guess you could make this work, but no. The absence of clarity regarding how to differentiate among species of microorganisms may have resulted in Cole and colleagues underestimating the number of microorganism species. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so there's two things. Firstly, this text attributes this discrepancy to two reasons, but the first one is just a hoax, right? The hoax, or the trap, is invertebrate. Anything related to invertebrate species and a new invertebrate species in the interim, this one, is therefore, it's a trap. If you choose this one, it's a trap. The second one is that morphological variability is poorly understood, right? So we have to go with this one. The fact that morphological variability of microorganisms is poorly understood. Some differences may be treated as variations. Yeah. May have resulted in Cole and colleagues underestimating the number of microorganism species. We're going to go with B. And indeed, the answer is B. Now, I could have just chosen this from the get-go, but these answers, might be tempting. The reason is they have related information, right? Bianchi and Mori may have been less sensitive. But here, we're not really talking about a specific party, right? We're talking about both parties and a difference between each. So this one's more focused on the sensitivity of one party compared to the other, and this one is just regarding... Okay, I need to turn on Do Not Disturb because I don't want to be disturbed while I'm doing this. Anyway, here it says... even less sensitive to the... Okay, so the reason C is wrong is because it's too specific. We're not talking about just a typical species of microorganism. We're talking about all the species in the microorganism category. So this one is too specific. D, absence of clarity regarding how to differentiate among species resulted in Cole and colleagues underestimating the number of microorganism species. And this one is wrong, and this one is wrong not because it's saying something wrong, but because it's just factually wrong. Because if you see here, the answer choice says Cole and colleagues underestimated the number of microorganism species, while in the text it says they reported more. So that's why D is wrong and B is correct. All right? Okay, so we're going to move on. I click this with my hand. Do the second question. Information and it's going to be information and ideas for a while, so buckle up. Okay, a common assumption among art historians is that the invention of photography in the mid-19th century displaced the painted portrait in public consciousness. I just ate dinner, so I'm sorry. The diminishing popularity of the portrait miniature, which coincided with the rise of photography, seems to support this claim. However, photography's impact on the portrait miniature may be overstated. Although records of art exhibitions in the Netherlands from 1820 to 1892 shows a decrease in the number of both full-sized and miniature portraits submitted, this trend was established before the invention of photography. Summarize it simply? Well, it's basically... there's a common assumption. It's being misunderstood because photography, well, it's not the main driving factor of why miniature portraits have decreased. Because miniature portraits started to decrease, before photography was invented. So now let's read the answer choices here. Based on the text, what can be concluded about the diminishing popularity of portrait miniature in the 19th century? Factors other than the rise of photography may be directly responsible. This is probably the answer. I'm going to put it there. Although portrait miniatures became less common than photographs, they were widely regarded as nobody cares about artistic merit because the text doesn't mention it. The popularity of the portrait miniature likely persisted for longer than art historians have assumed. Okay, well, this is, just there's no base for this. Nobody knows. It doesn't talk about popularity, and it definitely doesn't talk about it being persistent. As demand for portrait miniatures decreased, portrait artists likely shifted. You see, this is, logical, reasonable, but does it say so? No. So the answer here is definitely A. Strikes again. Okay, moving on to question 3. Enter 2021 article, Throwaway History. Oh, I almost scrolled too low there. Throwaway History towards a star. Every time here's a sort of a tip, right? I know you can read this in your eyes, right? With your eyes. But some people tend to have this bad habit of being stuck on a word. You don't want to be stuck on a word, phrase, silly name, difficult to pronounce name. And the reason people are stuck, or people get stuck rather, is because they try to pronounce every single word inside of their mind, right? And when you can't pronounce a word, or when you don't know the pronunciation of the word, rather, then you can't really pronounce it in your head, right? So my tip is just to think of a random name: Dolphin, McLaren, Verstappen. I'm just watching F1 videos these days, or Lucy, or Charles. Okay, just think of a name, and whenever you get one of these long nouns or this name, Anne Gardner, that's fine. But look, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but if it says an African poet named Ustani Kazuki or whatever, and it says that on paper, you're not going to be able to, pronounce that in your head instantly. So what you just do is you replace that name, because that's not important to you solving the SAT question. You just replace it with Lucy, with Dolphin, with Penguin, with Charles, McLaren, whatever. And just have that keyword. For me, the keyword is samurai or elephant. In her article, Elephant, scholar Samurai discusses John Johnson, a devoted collector of items intended to be discarded, including bus tickets and campaign pamphlets. Okay. Johnson recognized that scholarly institutions considered his expansive collection of ephemera, to be worthless. Indeed, it wasn't until 1968, after Johnson's death, that Oxford University's Bodleian, or Dolphin Library, acquired the collection, having grasped the item's potential value to historians and other researchers. Hence, the example of Johnson serves two. And we have to finish this text logically. Now, here, firstly, we are thrown away because this first part is a how would you say it? It's a trap. You could see this as a trap. The reason it's a trap is that it introduces our main target, John Johnson, by using someone else and their piece of literature, which I don't care about because that's not important, right? It says in a 2021 article, yada yada yada, somebody or Samurai discusses blank. I don't really care about this first two lines. It's not important. What's important is everything that follows it. But since they just shook you off here, you might be inclined to be focused. Your brain's still focused on Throwaway History and Anne Gardner, while your eyes are still reading John Johnson, okay? So the main point is John Johnson here, a devoted collector of items intended to be discarded. This is the main part, okay? Okay, so what did he do? Okay, so he collected items that were discarded. Okay, so first things first. He collected items that were to be discarded. It's some kind of art technique, I guess, and Anne Garner calls it ephemera. I'm using specific nouns just so it's not confusing. I can't use samurai or else you'll be thrown off too. Okay? And then Johnson, but the problem was his art style wasn't recognized, right? Nobody appreciated his art style until he died, and someone else got a hold of it. So, and then it became worthless, and then it became extremely valuable. So it's like Van Gogh's paintings. It was like a couple dollars when he was alive, and then he died, and then now it's worth billions. But okay, so hence the example of Johnson serves to, now that we understand the context, we can move on to the answer choices. Demonstrate the difficulties faced by contemporary historians. No, historians faced by contemporary historians. We don't care about contemporary historians. Conducting research at the Baudelaire. Actually, we do. Sort of. Why do we care about? No. No, this is absolutely off topic. I don't really care about contemporary historians. If this was 3 months ago, I'd be cursing because it was so irrelevant. Represented the challenge of incorporating examples of ephemera into collections of library. Yeah, we'll leave that alive. Lend support to arguments by historians and other researchers who continue to assert that. Okay, no, this is just hard to believe because we already know that. But historians and other researchers already know the potential value of Johnson's collection, right? So this is not. It's semi-irrelevant, and it's also the text doesn't want to make that point. Moving on, D. Illustrate both the relatively low scholarly regard in which ephemera once held and the later recognition of possible utility. Utility? Well, yes. I guess this one's right. Okay, so this one's going to be D, and I'm going to explain why between B and D, right? So firstly, just so you know, it is D, because I know that because I've just solved the question, so it's obvious, but okay, it's D for this reason. So it says here, illustrate both a relatively low scholarly regard in which ephemera was once held and the later recognition of ephemera's possible. It is ephemera, right? Ephemera's possible utility. Utility here is given by potential value to historians and other researchers. If that is not utility, I have no definition of the word. And low scholarly regard, it says up here, nobody cared about his art until, or collection until after he died. So, yeah, it's a good example of that. Why is B then incorrect? Well, it's not strictly incorrect. If there was a worse option here, I'd have to choose this one, but it's this example, right? His situation isn't an example of the challenge of incorporating ephemera into collections, okay? It's like the main point of this example is how low of a regard ephemera was held, right? That's the main point. This sort of strays from topic. Anyway, that is the reason why I am right. This is incredibly slow, and if you're wondering about that, it's because I'm trying to explain why that is. So for this next question, I'm just going to be a bit silent and then solve the question, and then, yeah, I'll just solve this one, and then I'll annotate. Okay, so we got some graphs. B. It is B, and I'm right. Okay. In all fairness, I think I've seen this somewhere before. It was in the hazy back of my memory. The point here is really simple. You read this text carefully. It's basically law firms were researchers were curious, right? Because you can't say law firms were curious. But researchers were curious if law firms would be given incentives if they were to expand in time for elections. So obviously, if a law firm expands, well, not obviously because I wouldn't know, but apparently when the law firm, or apparently for the researchers, they expected that if the law firm were to expand, that would be a good thing. And since during election season, law firm expansion, which is a good thing, would positively impact a candidate's support after he was elected, since a good event happened. So their idea was when law firms announced that they would expand after elections, then well, not after, but yeah, it is. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. Before elections, before elections. Well, no, it's in time. Wait a minute. Okay, let's just say it's around that time. Okay. If they were wait a minute. No, I have to make this right. I did get this right, but team contacted officials in thousands of units. Okay, so I would say that this research and this question is kind of flawed, because if we see the last sentence here, it says, the team contacted officials in thousands of municipalities inquiring about incentives for a firm looking to expand and indicating that the firm would announce expansion on a date either just before or just after. Oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. In time to benefit. This is just okay. This may be because I am not much of a U.S. citizen, or I am not much of a democratic citizen. But if expansions can be announced in time to benefit local elected officials, than if they can't. What timing would benefit local elected individuals? Or yeah. Well, I mean, at any rate, the answer here is B, because there's no difference between here. So the fact that it would change based on timing, which is this whole hypothesis, is the chances of us getting incentives for expansion will be directly related to timing. And it quite literally shows that there's no relation to timing. So that's why it's B. But that is why this question is rated hard, I guess. That's kind of fuzzy, I guess. Okay, we're going to annotate this, or not annotate, but I'm going to give you some commentary. The most recent iteration of the immersive theater experience, Sleep No More, which premiered in New York City in 2011, transforms its performance space, a 5-story warehouse, into a 1930s-era hotel. Audience members who wander through the labyrinth venue at their own pace and follow the actors as they play out simultaneous, interweaving narrative loops confront the impossibility of experiencing the production in its entirety. The play's refusal of narrative coherence thus hinges on the sense of spatial fragmentation that the venue's immense and intricate layout generates. Okay, so this is an interesting play. Basically, they have a 5-story warehouse where they have multiple plays or smaller plays going at once, right? And then I guess it's like a Halloween theme park, right? So it's like a theme park play where people just go around watching plays. But one of the points here is the incoherence. Since Since many plays are being played at the same time, pun, it's hard to make sense of the plot, right? So it says here the play's refusal of narrative coherence thus hinges on the sense of spatial fragmentation. Since it's so large and so disparate, so different in space, because there's so many plays going at once, and the space is probably literally fragmented into just different sectors, I guess, because they have to perform plays. The venues, so the venue generates this lack of coherence. That's basically what it talks about here. That's the main idea. So the question is, what does the text most strongly suggest about Sleep No More's use of its performance space? Okay, we'll jump right in. The choice of a New York City venue likely enabled the play's creators to experiment with the use of theatrical space in a way that venues of... Okay, so a New York City venue has nothing to do with it. They could literally make this venue in the middle of the Saharan desert, as long as it had a five-story warehouse with fragmented space, it would be enough. There is no reason for that to be New York City, okay? This is very capitalistic, and I hate this option, so it's not A. B. Audience members likely find the experience of the play disappointing because they generally cannot make their way through the entire venue. Well, that is speculative, and nobody said that they felt anything. In fact, this text is disregarding any emotional attachment or empathy towards the experience of the audience. Okay, so moving on, this one's not the answer. C. The production's dependence on a particular performance environment would likely make it difficult to reproduce exactly in a different theatrical space. We'll keep that one. Moving on to D. Audience members who navigate the space according to a recommended... Okay, I'm already starting to hate this one. Itinerary will likely have a better grasp of the play's narrative than audience members who depart from that itinerary. I have no idea what itinerary means, but regardless of that, it is not D, so it's C. The reason for that is very simple. Firstly, let's check I'm right before I amble. Yeah, C, right, it's C. Okay, so the reason it's not A, B, I've explained why it's not A, I've explained why it's not B, so let's move on to D. The reason it is not D is very simple. It takes, the point here is simultaneous interweaving narrative loops, okay? The impossibility of experiencing the production in its entirety, right? So, firstly, there is no recommended itinerary, whatever that means. That probably means like a recommended trail, I guess, or a recommended sequence of plays, right? It mentions nothing of the sort, so it's irrelevant, and that's why it's incorrect. So the answer here is C. Alrighty, moving on. Although, I almost scrolled too low there. Although many if this was the real test, I would have just said, although many dolphins, DNA sequences that move within an organism, but since this is not a test, I'll say transposomes. Okay, transposomes. Although many transposomes, the DNA sequences that move within an organism's genome through shuffling or duplication have become corrupted and inactive over time, those from the long interspersed nuclear elements line, okay, so this is a short term, I guess, elements family appears to remain active in the genomes of some species. Okay. In humans, they are functionally important within the hippocampus, a brain structure that supports complex cognitive processes. When the result of molecular analysis of two species of octopus, an animal known for its intelligence, were announced in 2022, the conformation of a line transposon in Octopus vulgaris, an octopus, I'm not going to pronounce that, genomes promoted researchers to hypothesize that the transposon family is tied to a species' capacity for advanced cognition. Okay. So, it talks about transposons, and mainly this line thingamabob that has apparently disappeared or... Okay, so firstly, it talks about transposons, which are DNA sequences that move and shuffle, duplicate, but they're just largely just there for most species. But in some species, like in this lineage here, from the long interspersed nuclear elements family, see, these things from this family seem to be active mainly in humans. Okay, these transposons are active in humans as hippocampus or hippocampi, I guess. Yeah, and then we all know what the hippocampi do, right? And then it comes down here and it mentions octopus, right? Yeah. Okay, so just to be clear, this is... Where's my Apple Pencil? I would like to draw you a diagram. Actually, I'll just write it here. So we have transposons. These are DNA sequences, yada, yada, yada. I don't care. But, and then we also have line. So what is line? This is larger, okay? So it is in here. Transposons. Line is a type of transposon that's active within A, humans, and B, octopi. Or octopuses, I'm sorry. Okay, which finding, if true, and then the conclusion here, right, is that researchers to hypothesize that the transposon family is tied to a species' capacity for advanced cognition. Basically, so there's this transposon, so the line transposon family. So the researcher's hypothesis is, this is way too small, that is still way too small, is line equals, or rather, cause it, or line family, transposons create capacity for advanced cognition. Yeah. Okay, so what would support this hypothesis? Let's move down here. A, the line transposon is an O. vulgaris and O whatever his name is genomes is active in an octopus brain structure that functions similarly to the human hippocampus. That is very strong because it says capacity for advanced cognition. And indeed, it is tied to our species, our as in humans, our species capacity for advanced cognition because it functions in the hippocampus. So it could be said the same for octopus brain. It could be said the same thing for existing in octopus brain structures. So this one's probably the answer. B. The human genome contains multiple transposons from the line family that are primarily active in the hippocampus. This has nothing to do with that. It doesn't talk about octopuses for 1 second. And plus, it's multiple transposons while we're trying to focus on line ones. A consistent number, C, a consistent number of copies of line transposons is present across the genomes of most octopus species with few known corruptions. Nobody cares because it does not show the effect of how it relates to capacity for advanced cognition. It just says it's consistently there and with few corruptions. D. D. vulgaris and D. whatever his name is have similar brains than humans do relative to body size, but their genomes contain sequences from a wider variety of transposon families. I have nothing to say, but irrelevant, too much information, and you just wasted my time. So the answer here is A, as is said of it. Moving on. Biologists have predicted that birds' feather structures vary habitat temperature, but this hadn't been tested in mountain environments. Well, okay, I'm not going to pronounce that word, but I have to, right? So, ornithologist Sahas Barv. This is why I don't pronounce names. I go, the dolphin studied feathers from 249 songbird species inhabiting different elevations. That is way more simple than going ornithologist Sahas Barv studied feathers from 249 songbird species inhabiting different elevations and thus experiencing different temperatures in the Himalaya Mountains. He found that temperatures of high elevation species do not only have greater proportion of warming and downy sections to flat and smooth sections than do feathers of low elevation species. But high elevation species also tend to be longer. The feathers tend to be longer, providing a thicker layer of insulation. Okay, well, basically, this one's really simple. A biologist studied two different kinds of, it says here 249 songbird species, but basically you can categorize them into two kinds. One is high elevation species, and the other is low elevation. And basically, they studied feathers, and he found that high elevation has more warming feathers and more warming downy feathers, whatever that means, than flat and smooth feathers, right? And then they also tend to be longer and thicker. Yeah, okay. So, okay, let's jump right into the answer choices. It is talking about the main idea of the text. The main idea is going to have something to do with comparison of the two categories of bird species living in high altitudes and low altitudes. So let's dive right in. Barr's investigation shows that some species of Himalayan songbirds have evolved feathers that better regulate body temperature than do feathers of other species, contradicting previous predictions. Okay, well, here it says that this study is conducted for what reason? Someone predicted something, right? That feather structures vary with habitat temperature. It doesn't contradict it. It's exactly what that is. So A is wrong. Barr found an association between habitat temperature and feather structure among Himalayan songbirds. New support to a general prediction. This is probably the answer. Moving on. Barr discovered that songbirds have adapted to their environment by growing feathers without flat and smooth sections. No. We're not talking about songbirds. We are talking about songbirds that either live in high altitudes or low altitudes. Nobody cares about songbirds. The result of Barr's study suggests that the ability of birds to withstand cold temperatures is determined more strongly by feather length. Okay. No. No. Well, I guess this may be true, but I wouldn't care because it's not challenging an established belief. So the answer is B, right? It is lending support. It is reinforcing, corroborating, buttressing, whichever one you prefer, just not weakening. A short question at last. Researchers found that disruptions to an enjoyable experience, like a short series of advertisement during a television show, often increases viewers' reported enjoyment. Suspecting that disruptors to an unpleasant experience would have the opposite effect, the researchers had participants listen to construction noise for 30 minutes, anticipated that those whose listening experience was frequently interrupted with short breaks of silence would thus... Okay. You have to be good with symmetry and parallelism here. Well, not really, but if you're sleepy, then you have to be good with it. Basically, what it's trying to say is when you're interrupted when having a good experience, then happiness and enjoyment increases, right? So when you're in having a bad experience, here it's just construction noise, then when you're interrupted a couple of times during that experience, your distress intensifies. That's what it's trying to say. Fine. So basically the conclusion would be that those who are frequently interrupted with short breaks of calm, peaceful silence would still feel more distressed than those who are just listening to 30 minutes of agonizing construction noise, right? Rate the listening experience as more negative than those who listen. This is probably the answer. Rate the experience as lasting for less. Nobody cares about lasting time. Perception, the volume. Nobody cares about volume. It is B. See? The rest are irrelevant, but probably and commonsensically true. Okay, another spreadsheet that I adore. Nucleobase concentrations from Murchison meteorite and soil samples in parts per billion. That's really a very, very small quantity, but moving on. We're going to read the text first and then come back and examine the graph here. The spreadsheet here. Employing high-performance liquid chromatography, a process that uses pressurized water to separate material into its component molecules, astrochemist I'll pronounce it, Yashiro Oba and colleagues analyzed 2 samples of the, you're really, don't stretch it, Murchison meteorite that landed in Australia, as well as soil from the landing zone of the meteorite, to determine the concentrations of various organic molecules. Okay. By comparing the relative concentrations of types of molecules, best known as nuclear bases, in the Murchison meteorite with those in the soil, the team concluded that there is evidence that the nucleobases in the Murchison meteorite formed in space and are not the result of contamination on Earth. Okay. So basically what it's trying to say is really simple. This meteorite landed, and this meteorite, the nucleobases here were already on the meteorite when it was in space, and it's not the result of contamination on Earth, right? Okay, so we need some data in here to prove that nucleobases existed before it hit Earth. All right? Nucleobase. Okay. Sample 1, sample 2, and soil, right? So we should just say that these things existed here, right? So I'm not going to pronounce that, purine existed here, and while these were existing here, they weren't detected here. And this is just not consistent, so we're not using this data, but yeah. I'm going to say in both meteorite samples, hogrite or whatever, that existed, and both purine and that one existed, but it's not here. It's definitely A, and there's nothing more you can do to prove me wrong, because it is A. Moving on. Okay. Paleontologists searching for signs of ancient life have found many fossilized specimens of prehistoric human ancestors, including several from the Paleo... Okay, I really hate history and biology because it has so many nouns, but whatever. From the Pleiostocene... We're going to go with Platon era, okay? Platon era, discovered in geological formation in the Mina Okabe Quarry. I just like Mina Okabe because she's a great artist, so we're just going to go with that one. Mina Okabe Quarry in Japan. However, to study the emergence of the earliest multicellular organisms to appear on Earth, researchers must turn elsewhere, such as the... You're really pushing it. Edward Geological Formation at Mistaken Point in Canada. UNESCO World Heritage Site. The 146-hectare reserve contains more than 10,000 fossils that together document a critical moment in evolutionary history. I'm going to have to read that again, honestly, because I have lost so much information that I would have retained if the nouns here were good. So basically, when you're taking the test, don't even bother changing it to dolphin. Just don't read it in your mind. In fact, it's even better if you don't read words out in your mind at all. It improves your reading speed. Look. I'm reading right now. Just give me like 10 seconds. Okay, done. Okay, so it's talking about 2 points, but this one's a hoax. It's a trap, and the main point is mistaken point here. So, What does the text indicate about the geological formation at Mistaken Point? Well, what does it say? It says it's the earliest multicellular organisms to appear on Earth. I personally wouldn't care less if that was multicellular or if my phone had 3 bars of cellular data, but it says so. So moving on. A, it holds a greater number of fossils, but from a smaller variety. That's not what this, that's not the main point here. Okay, it says it's critical. It has significance because it is so early. It's the earliest multicellular organisms. So A is sure, but no, not the best option. It has provided evidence that the earliest human species may have emerged before earliest human species. We are not talking about humans here. Moving on. C. It is widely considered by paleontologists to be the most valuable source of information about prehistoric life forms. Okay, we're moving on. It contains specimens from an older time period than those found in the formation of Minato Okabe Quarry. It's probably D, but just to be sure, we'll just go over each one of these quickly. So, A, we have no idea how many fossils there are in Minato Okabe Quarry in Japan. I don't care, and apparently the text doesn't seem to care either. Earliest human. We are not talking about humans, so A and B are just incorrect. It is widely considered by paleontologists to be the most valuable source of information about prehistoric life forms. That is... Okay, it just says it documents a critical moment in evolutionary history. It has nothing to do with prehistoric life forms. Okay, so I'm gonna have to go with D. And yes, I am correct. Okay, so that's the first 10 questions done. Moving on. No, normally I could solve these questions 1 minute per question, more or less. But since I'm annotating, and I do think commentating is important and pretty fun for the main part, I am still going to do it. I'm going to do 20 questions here, and then I'll probably end this video. The text is adapted from Edgar Allan Poe's 1849 story, Landor's Cottage. During a pedestrian trip last summer through one or two of the river counties of New York, I found myself, as the day declined, somewhat embarrassed about the road I was pursuing. The land undulated very remarkably, and my path, for the last hour, had wound about and about so confusedly in its efforts to keep in the valleys that I no longer knew in what direction lay the sweet village of B. Is that a curse word? Probably not. Where I had determined to stop the night. Okay, a pro tip. Actually, not a pro tip, an intermediate tip, because I'm not even a pro. Don't read this stuff. Read it, but don't read it aloud. And please, for God's sake, don't read it word for word. If you can't skim through poems and Jane Eyre and Moby Dick and Edgar Allan Poe, you are going to have a nightmare from questions 8 through 12. Those are going to be hell on earth for you, because you're literally going to be reading like me. You're going to be like, New York, I found myself, and you're not going to be unable to understand, because these sentences were written in the 1900s or the 1800s, give or take. Oh, it's the 1800s, all right. It's the 1840s. Anyway, so it's asking about the main idea of the text. And as you can see about how convoluted the path of the narrator and both his path and his narration sounds, we can, I guess, sort of assume that it has to do with a lack of direction, right? So A, narrator remembers a trip he took and admits to getting lost. This is probably the answer, because he says he has no idea in what direction lay the sweet village of B curse word. The narrator recalls fond memories. These are no way fond. If this is fond, then I have no idea what fond means. The narrator describes what he saw. No, yeah. Unless time is something you can see, I don't think so. The narrator explains the difficulties he encountered on a trip. He did not overcome them. Whether I had to determine to stop for them, that is not overcoming. It's It's A. Yeah. Okie dokie. Moving on. I'm just gonna take a little drink. Don't worry, it's not alcohol. It's just water. I feel like Reinhardt. Don't know why I said that. Okay, I love these questions. About literature. You know why? Because even the College Board guys know if they make these questions too hard, nobody's gonna get it. So they're easy. Even if it's difficulty 3, don't whine about it, just solve it, because it's not that hard. Oh, jeez. I really almost scrolled too low there. The following text is adapted by Maria Christ. I don't really care. Short story, The Vine Leaf. It is saying in the capital of Mexico that Mary carries more family secrets under his hat than any archbishop. That's pretty funny. Doctor's hat is, appropriately enough, uncommonly capacious, rising very high and sinking so low that it seems to be supported by his ears and eyebrows, and it has a furry look, as if it has been brushed the wrong way, which is perhaps what happens to it if it is ever brushed at all. When the doctor takes it off, the family secrets do not fly out like a flock of parrots, but remain nicely bottled up beneath a dome of old and highly polished ivory. Okay. All right. Based on the text, how do people in the capital of Mexico most likely regard Dr. Mary? Okay, A is wrong because nobody talks about him being disheveled. Okay. Mexico reminds me about the Mexican Prime Minister of Defense, but that's another story. Few feel concerned that he will diverge their confidences. This is probably the answer. Some dislike how freely he discusses his own family. We neither know that some people dislike him, nor do we know the fact that he freely discusses his own family. So this is out of question, wrong. Most would be unimpressed by him were it not for his professional expertise. You're being rude, buddy, okay? Show some respect, option D. It is B. And so it is, and so it shall. Alright, another difficulty 3. Not that we care, apparently. Okay. Okay, so apparently this is something related to history. I'm going to try to use my best British accent here. Buckle up, boys. Or buckle up, folks. In 1534 CE, King Henry VIII of England split with the Catholic Church and declared himself head of the Church of England, in part because Pope Clement VII refused to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. 2 years later, Henry VIII introduced a policy titled the Dissolution of the Monasteries that by 1540 had resulted in the closure of all Catholic monasteries in England and the confiscation of their estates. Some historians assert that the enactment of the policy was primarily motivated by perceived financial opportunities. I don't know if that was British enough. Maybe I have to, make it more intense. But at any rate, okay, so this is a really, really easy question. The reason it's probably difficult is because the answer choices are long. Okay, so which quotation... Okay, so basically, let's summarize the text up here. Okay, well, let me read the question first. Read which quotation from a scholarly article best supports the assertion the historians mentioned in the test. Okay, so the historian's assertion is this. This Henry VIII guy supposedly split with the Church of England because they wouldn't let him marry Catherine of Aragon, which they should, because Aragon is a sick character in Lord of the Rings, but that's besides the point. So anyway, on grounds of this, Henry VIII, he created a policy where he, you know what dissolution is. It's like, I like to think of it as forced bankruptcy, or just like an eviction order from the country. So they just have to leave the country, and that's basically what they did. But they didn't just leave, they also left everything that they built. So some people or some historians speculate that this act was enacted so that the Crown of England could seize control of the property and the financial opportunities of the church. Okay, now let's take a look at the answer choices. So we have to find an answer choice, or rather a quotation from a scholarly article that supports the historian's assertion, right? At the time of the dissolution of the monasteries, about 2% of the adult male population of England were monks. By 1690, the population of the adult male population who were monks were less than 1%. Nobody cares about population, okay? Population, it only matters when it's taxes. Plus, if it was 2% and 1%, that's barely a difference. A contemporary description of the dissolution of the monasteries, recounts witnesses' testimony that monks were allowed to keep the contents of their cell. Okay, this is actually the exact opposite, because it actually respects the monks and their possessions. In 1535, the year before enacting the dissolution of the monasteries, Henry commissioned a survey of the value of church holdings in England. The work, performed by sheriffs, bishops, and magicians, apparently, because I can't pronounce that word, began that January and was swiftly completed by the summer. So what this is saying is that Henry did a sort of a sneaky little survey about how much money and capital the church held before he set to work, which is pretty funny, honestly. You know what, Henry? I'll give it to you, mate. I'll give it to you. It is funny. The October 1536 revolt, known as the Pilgrimage of Grace, had several economic motives. We're not even going to read this because I already know answer choice is C, because it's so glaringly obvious, but whatever. The dissolution of the monasteries, which closed reliable sources of food and shelter for many, and rents and taxes throughout northern England that were not merely high but predatory. This talks about just something bad that happened. Nobody cares because it's not related. It's C. Yeah, if you didn't know, I'm not really used to talking that much, and the exception would be my video reflections, right? But no, I'm not really used to talking that much. So I have to take a drink from my sip water cup every once in a while, so to keep my throat nice and wet. Okay, let's resume. So the graph shown here, the title is Participants' Responses to 3 Review Conditions. Okay, so we can speculate that this is going to be about review conditions, but that's basically meaningless because in 0.5 seconds in the real test room, you'd be reading the text. To understand how expressions of anger in reviews of products affect readers of those reviews, business scholar Desmond and colleagues measured study participants' responses to 3 versions of the same negative review. A control review expressing no anger, a review expressing a high degree of anger, and a review expressing a low degree of anger. Reviewing the data, a student concludes that the mere presence of anger in a review may not negatively affect readers' perceptions of the review, but a high degree of anger in a review does worsen readers' perception of the review. So basically what this is talking about is real simple. Let's say you watch tech YouTubers, right? If a tech YouTuber has he's angry, but his anger is controlled and sort of stable anger. So it's like Marques Brownlee, but he's just angry at Apple, right? If that's the case, then no problem. That existence of anger doesn't degrade the review at all. But let's say it's not Marques Brownlee, and instead it's some fat, obese, middle-aged guy in his Toyota Camry eating a Burger King Big Whopper, and he's whining about the iPhone 16 inside his car, inside his dirty little car, and is super frustrated. And by the way, the car hardly fits him. Maybe that's too disgusting for your imagination to imagine, but picture that, and he's just super angry. He's not even coherent. We don't even know what he's saying because he's so angry at the iPhone 16 that he's on a rampage. Okay, that would still count as a review technically, but it would show high anger. And what the researchers are saying is that reviews with high anger are less likely to be viewed positively, or in other words, they're just likely to be viewed in a negative light, as it says here. High degree of anger in a review does worsen readers' perceptions of the review. I think that analogy was perfect, but if you don't agree, I don't care. Okay, so which choice best describes data from the graph that support the students' conclusion? Okay, helpfulness of review, attitude toward reviewed product. Okay, so we're not really interested in this, right? Because this is like attitude toward the product. We want the attitude toward the review, right? So as we can see, when it's in high anger, it's noticeably low. But when it's either in no anger or low anger, it's basically the same. So we have to find an answer choice here that says the helpfulness of the review was directly correlated to whether the anger amount was high anger, no anger, or low anger. Okie dokie. Answer choice A. An average participant's rating of the helpfulness of a review is substantially higher over other participants' rating the review product regardless of which type of participants. Review participant. No, this one's not. This one is not the answer. Okay, moving on to B. This one just compares the two graphs, and we don't care about these two, nor the comparison between them. Compared with participants who saw the control review, participants who saw the low anger review rated the review as slightly more helpful. I guess, but that's really, we're not really trying to, but yeah, I guess if this is like a last resort, we're not really trying to compare between the control group and the two angers, but we'll have to see. Okay, see, participants who saw the low anger review rated the review as slightly more helpful, and participants who saw the control review did. But participant attitude, okay, we're not talking about attitude. Compared with participants who saw the low anger review, participants who saw the high review rated the review as less helpful and had a less positive attitude toward the reviewed product. This right here is the answer. Okay, reviewing the data, a student concludes that the mere presence of anger in a review may not be negative, affect the reader's perceptions of the review, but a high, yeah. So, wait, I'm gonna have to say this is B, because this conclusion also mentions a control group. So B. Yep. Okay, if the reason it's not D is because D, we have no idea or no way of knowing if the helpfulness of the review is lower than the control group. And that's important because it says anger in a review may not negatively affect readers' perceptions of the review. And that's important, and that can only be shown with a control group. Okay, well, that's going to be our last one because my throat hurts too much, and yeah, simple way I can put it. The following text is adapted from County Cullen's, Thoughts in a Zoo. They and their cruel traps and we and ours survey each other's rage and pass the hours, commensurating each the other's woe to mitigate his own pain's fiery glow. Man could but little proffer in exchange, save that his cages have a larger range. That lion with his lordly untamed heart has in some man his human counterpart, some lofty soul in dreams and visions wrapped, but in the stifling flesh securely trapped. Okay, so basically it's drawing an analogy between animals in zoos and humans in their flesh. Simple. This is a pretty straightforward poem. I would argue that any poem that isn't Emily Dickinson or Robert Frost is relatively straightforward, but that's going to be controversial, so I almost didn't say that. Almost. Anyway, based on the text, what challenge do humans sometimes experience? No, we're not talking about taming. So A is incorrect. B, they cannot focus on setting attainable goals because the lack of motivation. Who says anything about goals? I didn't know I was reading Stephen Covey and his 7 Habits. Why is that on the SAT? B, wrong. C, they quickly become frustrated when faced with difficult tasks because a lack of self-control. Again, we are not reading Stephen Covey and his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. D, they have aspirations that cannot be fulfilled because of certain limitations. This is probably the answer. It is D. Told you. Anyway, that's going to be it. I don't know if I'm going to do this again because I noticed that my throat kind of hurts after I do it. But it's pretty fun, and I can make puns, and it gives me a lot of excuses to talk and throw jokes and exercise my social comedy. And try to see if it's on trend. So maybe I will do it again, Who knows? But maybe this SAT in 3 days will go so well that I won't have to ever see you guys again in this form of video. Anyway, that's going to be it. Bye-bye. Hope you got something, whether it was entertainment or actual help for the SAT. But yeah, have a nice day. Have a lovely day, fellas.